A crise imobiliária que se alastrou dos Estados Unidos para o mundo tem sido debelada em seus sintomas, mas o risco de agravamento da doença permanece. Ao menos para este ponto, convergem as opiniões de teóricos das mais variadas tendências, debruçados sobre as causas e efeitos dos males econômicos do mercado nos dias atuais. Mas alguns acreditam que não há mais remédio. O cientista político norte-americano Immanuel, por exemplo, entende que o mundo está diante de um doente terminal. O velho professor da Universidade de Yale e autor do Sistema Mundial Moderno, uma referência no mundo acadêmico em todo o mundo, acha que chegamos a um ponto de esgotamento da acumulação do capital e entramos numa era caótica, de incerteza, porque o sistema atual será forçosamente substituído por um outro que não sabemos qual é e, portanto, não sabemos se será melhor ou pior. Será, segundo ele, certamente pós-norte-americano.
Professor, help us to understand better these recent world financial crisis under the lights of your world systems theory, which foresees scary times within the next 50 years. How do you see this crisis in this context, or more precisely in the context of the end of the accumulation of capital, which you think we are closer to get to?
Well, you can analyze what is going on in the world financial markets in several different ways. One, it's quite normal in the history of capitalism to have moments when things are going badly and there is a recession or a depression or a loss in profit and so on. So the whole process of capitalism historically has been a cyclical one, and there have been moments when it goes up and moments when it goes down. That's absolutely normal. On the other hand, we have a particular situation right now linked to the decline of the United States, in which one of its last principal strengths is the fact that the dollar still is the sole reserve currency of the world, which means that the United States government is the only government that doesn't have to worry about debt. It simply prints more money whenever it wishes to print more money, and nothing can be done about it. In addition, the United States debt at the moment is a peculiar kind of debt because it is basically financed by a few countries, principally China, then to some extent Korea, India, Norway, who buy U.S. Treasury bonds. And the main reason they buy it is partly it's a good place to put your money because the interest rates are quite good, but partly they want to sustain U.S. purchasing power. China in particular wants to sustain U.S. purchasing power so they can buy Chinese goods. Now, then there's still another context in which you can put this, which is that we are living, in my view, a major transition from the existing capitalist world economy to some other system whose name we do not yet know and whose realities we cannot foresee. And the major element in this transition is its volatility. It's a chaotic situation. Things go up, things go down very fast, it's very violent, very uncertain, and so it's extremely difficult for anyone to predict on a short-run basis what's going to happen.
But the reason why I made you this question is because some specialists have named August 9, when central banks had to intervene in the market to restore at least a semblance of stability, and they had to do it again. They named it the Debtonation Day, with the word debt, which means the end of deregulation, privatization of finance, that marks the globalization era. Do you agree with them?
Well, I agree that so-called globalization and the openness of financial markets is very much in question at the moment. And one of the things that's been discussed in the press lately is the growing attitude of major governments elsewhere in the world, in Western Europe, in Japan, and so forth, to say, well, these decisions on what the U.S. does should not be made by the United States alone, because it has too much impact. It's too strong a force in the world economy, and we ought to have some say in it. And now, that's a terribly new concept. Because they're in effect saying the U.S. has to be controlled by other countries. Well, you know that the International Monetary Fund controls governments all over the world. The only government it doesn't touch is the United States. So it's now a question of whether there's going to be some governmental interventions by other governments vis-a-vis the United States government. And in general, yes, you're right. There is already a move to much more governmental control of financial markets.
Yeah, the meltdown had to rely on the state.
Yes. So, of course, it's always been a myth that the financial markets are entirely free at any moment of the states. They don't really even want to be free. You see, capitalism works on the premise that government action is bad, except when it's good for me. It's bad when it's good for somebody else, but it's good when it's good for me. So capitalism has a very hypocritical language about the market. They don't really believe in the market capitalists, right? In fact, the market is in general bad for capitalism.
But do you believe we are getting into a lengthy and waterless depression?
Well, I think that may well happen. That's first of all. And secondly, we are certainly, the last 20 or 30 years have been a relatively free trade, free market-oriented period. We are now into the beginnings of a major protectionist era. Mm-hmm. And the United States is and will be very protectionist. Western Europe is and will be very protectionist. Japan, and indeed even China, will be very protectionist. And we're going to see enormous protectionist barriers all over the place. And frankly, the word globalization will disappear from the vocabulary of journalists, of scholars, and of politicians within 5 years. Yes, it will be a historic memory that once upon a time there were people who talked about something called globalization.
When you speak about the end of the system, I know you're not a prophet, but which system will replace it? A similar one with inequality, hierarchy, polarization, or a new universalism, not the rhetorical one as you denounce in your last book?
Well, look, in this I'm very much a protagonist of what is called complexity sciences. And what complexity sciences say about systems, all kinds of systems, physical systems, chemical systems, biological systems, social systems, all kinds of systems, is A, they're never permanent, B, they always move far from equilibrium, and when they move far enough from equilibrium, they bifurcate. Now that's a technical term which simply means that there are two possible solutions for an equation rather than only one. When you bifurcate, all right, when a system bifurcates, it will eventually opt for one or the other of the two possible solutions and stabilize again. Okay? This period of transition that we're in is this period of bifurcation. It's chaotic. Now,
so it's not of a stabilization yet.
No. And then what complexity sciences says is that it is not possible, it's intrinsically impossible to predict which of the two forks, alternatives, will be taken. It's not simply a matter of lack of knowledge. There is no way of predicting. So you just have to live through it, and you find out at the end that it's gone one way or the other. Now, in social terms, that means that the new system will be basically one of two kinds. It will be a different structure than the capitalist system, but it will share its basic feature of being hierarchical, being exploitative, and being polarizing. And the alternative is a system that's relatively democratic and relatively egalitarian. Which of the two we'll have, I don't know.
Don't you have an intuition?
Oh, no, I don't have an intuition. It's 50-50, right? And indeed, but the good news is that you, I, and everyone else can affect this, because every little action can push the system in one direction or another. The issue is not saving capitalism or not saving capitalism, it's what's going to replace it. A better system or a worse system? And if we want to have the better system, we push as we can. This is the motivation of my own political activity and what I urge upon others.
Well, anyway, we are talking about a post-American world, as you described in your conference.
Yes.
And you defined the United States moment as the one of a tiger at bay. What did you exactly mean?
The metaphor is that the tiger, when he is trapped, when can't get out of a situation, tends to be very ferocious and to strike out in desperation. So the danger is, the real danger for the world and for the United States is that the people in power in the U.S. government will strike out madly. Indeed, I think Iraq was such a striking out. If they now attack Iran, which will be absolute madness from a political and from a military point of view, but they might do it in desperations because the tiger is a
yesterday they are not interested in this.
Well,
they don't have conditions to do it. In
the particular situation of the United States right now, I think the American people certainly don't want another war. The U.S. Army and Marines certainly don't, because they feel stretched and in internal crisis. You know, so there's sort of an internal struggle there. And then there are people in the government who say, well, we have to continue our so-called diplomatic efforts because it's madness to do anything else and will irritate everybody in the world and so forth. And there are people who say, as an American admiral said in the Spanish-American War, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Don't worry, just go, just do it. And will they be powerful enough to do it? They might. I don't rule it out. It will be irrational, it will be crazy, it will be negative for the United States, for Iran, and for the world, but I don't say it can't happen.
The sociologist and economist Giovanni Arregui, your colleague,
yes,
believes that we're not just seeing the end of the American hegemony, but the end of the hegemonic era as well. Do you go along with this idea?
Yes, it depends what one means by that. Yes, of course, because what I'm saying is hegemony is a phenomenon of the capitalist world economy, of the modern world system. If the modern world system were to continue for another 200 or 300 or 400 years, there'd be a new hegemonic power. Of that I'm certain. But since I think that it's in crisis and that it will collapse, is collapsing, yes, there might be a new hegemonic power.
Reminds me of an aphorism that you have made in one of your statements. The absolutely certain thing is the future, since the past is constantly changing.
That is absolutely correct. And, you know, the past is our imagination of the present as to what it was, and we define the past in terms of what we need in the present, and that's true in Latin America as anywhere else.